Welcome to the DeFi Standard, and this is Mickey B. Fresh.
And I'm Lars, and super happy to be with you, Mickey, and whoever's going to be listening in here. Today, we wanted to do something a little different. What we normally do is either dive really deep into a topic, and Mickey, you're one of the best in the field about XRP and Flare Network and Flare Finance, really diving deep into an aspect of it, or having a conversation around something that a lot of us already know. But today, we've been thinking about what was it like before we ever made that step into purchasing our first bit of cryptocurrency. I remember being in that time. I remember a time when I just could not get any sense of Bitcoin other than it was a completely ridiculous thing. And so what we'd like to do is start out creating a series of videos that will help people who were in that place that we were before we had made our first step into cryptocurrency. And so this first video here, we want to share a little bit, kind of just remembering that time. And then we want in the succeeding series of videos, new to DeFi, to kind of introduce the field. And hopefully by the end of watching this series of videos, you'll be able to dive into the website to the deeper, more specific pieces of information here at the DeFiStandard.com. And you'll also be able to understand Mickey's videos better over at the Mickey B. Fresh YouTube channel. So, Mickey, what was life like that got you actually interested in cryptocurrency before you actually started?
So, like many who came into crypto, I was made aware of Bitcoin and I saw the price going up. And I saw this asset moving up in price and I looked at it as like this magic internet money. But I didn't know how it worked. I just knew it was digital. And it was basically looking and everything was focused on the price like of this asset going up. But it wasn't until I really dove into the technology and understood that Bitcoin and these other crypto assets are underpinned by an actual protocols, which are blockchain or distributed ledgers, and they're actually decentralized. And I had to look up what decentralized actually meant, and that was a experience there, just learning that a whole system or network could operate without a central authority. So there was nobody being in control of the network. That just kind of like fascinated me and it blew my mind. I'm like, how can this all work when there's thousands of nodes all over the world and nobody can censor the network? And it's all based on rules of the protocol. And that's really what drew my interest and how it is different from the traditional markets and regular fiat money. And then learning that there's actually set supply on the blockchain that's built into these protocols. So understanding that they were actually protocols and math-based currency, really gained my interest, and that's where I began looking. But like most of us, price was the initial focus. But once I got beyond that, that's when I really started to see what was possible out there.
I remember for myself, I became aware of Bitcoin before it had that big run up in price in 2017, and I was starting to get kind of interested in it. And I'm not a person who invests in stuff. I just put stuff in retirement and kind of forget it. And so this isn't an area that I'm in for like big financial background experience or reasons. But saw Bitcoin go up, and then I saw it crash down, and it was like, oh my gosh, how could this thing really
Mm-hmm.
be anything that's useful or going to have a big use case? Or I didn't even know the word use case
Mm-hmm.
at that time. And then that this transition in these years, I actually purchased my first XRP in August of 2019. And I thought, I just like you were talking about, I just buy it for the price of it and just let it sit there. It seemed to make sense, but it's become a very engaging journey to like understand this thing. So much comes up. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Mickey, but I want to say one thing here to start with. Like you said, oh, I had to look up that word decentralized. And that's a real tip like there's so much language in here and so many concepts. And if you take the time when they come up and you don't understand something, just Google it and learn a little bit about it. I was so confused when I started to get into this, and just bit by bit, term by term, it started to make sense. And at a certain moment, for most people, there's a light bulb that goes off. So handing it back to you, Mickey.
So speaking of light bulb moments, came when I realized that these assets are built on these networks, and they're more than just speculation assets, that eventually they're going to have real use cases and utility that goes beyond what traditional assets could do, like commodities or securities or currencies. But initially, Bitcoin you saw as a currency, that it was going to replace fiat. But the market has just constantly evolved, and we're in a process now where we're moving from speculative trading on exchanges and day trading and prices going up to these assets actually being used on their networks, and now applications being built. And that's where the light bulb moment for me came, is that we are now having financial products that typically were only available in traditional markets offered by banks being actually built on these underlying blockchains, and then the native tokens to go along with them with that value. And you're replicating loans, insurance, and different types of financial assets, that decentralized finance is coming, where that's also called open finance. But that's this industry and this whole market, it's evolving so rapidly. So what Bitcoin was initially created to do as a P2P payment system has now evolved into a store of value and a hedge against fiat. And that's just one cryptocurrency. And now you have these other networks where you could actually see the foundation of new financial system being built for the future. And that's really what interests me so much, that these assets could do so much more than anything we've ever seen before in the history, and that they're based on actually math and cryptography, and they're not controlled by any one entity. So that's where my light bulb moment came.
So Mickey has a Telegram group that's inside of his Patreon, and we always have these great discussions in there. But today there was somebody that was sharing a Twitter about somebody calling the upcoming Flare network a Ponzi scheme. And I know that as I've spoken to other people, like, well, that's just got to be a Ponzi scheme. There can't really be anything to this. And I guess I just really want to honor wherever it is that we're coming from as we approach this whole new area. And Mickey, you've done, ever since you looked up that first word, decentralized or whatever it was, you've been diving in and doing the research and trying to make sense of this, and it's been such a huge benefit to so many people. So we're really grateful for that. But again, just back to this transition point, like, how could any of this be real? You can't just, you can't just program up this game and all of a sudden that becomes the money of the world. Go ahead.
Well, it has to start somewhere. So the speculative trading has basically kicked the industry off. So the value has come from speculation on these assets and protocols one day being used. And now we're actually seeing that take place with decentralized finance. And these applications open up opportunities of how to distribute tokens without being investment contracts. So you could yield farm and provide liquidity. That's another big thing here, is the new DeFi primitives. And when I say primitives, it's a new type of protocol, I guess is the best way to say it, where in the traditional markets, you typically have the order books at a market on a bid side and an ask side, and a market maker provides that liquidity, and then traders are the market takers. But in DeFi, what has happened now is, with new protocols built on with smart contracts, allow for decentralized exchanges, which are liquidity pools where everyone can be a market maker instead of just the big whales. They could provide liquidity for one side of the pool, and then the traders or the market takers can actually then use that liquidity if they want to swap from one asset to another, and there's no intermediary here. And I think that is revolutionary in just the concept to be able to provide deep liquidity and bootstrap it right out of the gate for many networks. It allows them to flourish quickly instead of having to get put on all these exchanges and then being all over the world fragmented the liquidity. Where with decentralized exchanges, this is totally new concept that has come about because of blockchain and DLT and smart contracts. So now you could bootstrap liquidity for these assets, and then with liquidity, you could build other financial products around that. And that's really what's at the heart of a lot of these decentralized finance, and also referred to as open finance protocols, is you could obtain and provide liquidity with no central intermediary. It's just software. So there's no counterparty risk on the other side. And it's transparent of how much liquidity is in the actual pool. And those are things that the traditional markets have not been able to accomplish. And this is the next generation of financial systems. And it started with Bitcoin, but that was only the beginning. And it's evolving so rapidly that by the month things change. So it's very important to just understand the basics and follow along, because it's going to be the next decade a revolution in the whole financial system.
All right, thanks, Mickey. And as I listen to you now, these terms are familiar to me. But if you're new, if you haven't yet entered in, or if you have entered in and you're just starting to figure it out, you can listen to this simple little video here probably 5 or 6 times and just pause it and look up terms. What's a counterparty? What's P2P? What's a primitive? And just slowly build out your awareness and your knowledge. I guess a thing to say here in February of 2021, we're still very early in this journey. A lot's happened since the introduction of Bitcoin, a dozen years ago now, but we're still very early. You, if you're going to participate in this, are very early in the journey. And the more that you can understand, the better it's going to be. So, Mickey, I think we're kind of closing in on the end of this first video. Does that seem to make sense to you?
Yes, just one last thing I want to say here is that we're going from speculators to being participants in this market. And that's one big shift that's happening right now as the market is evolving here in 2021. We're starting to see real utility take place, and DeFi has allowed everyone to be able to participate and use their assets to earn yield and to earn new assets. And that's something important that has changed from a couple years ago. So I just think that we need to understand that shift is actually taking place right now, from just being speculators to being actual participants. And these are community networks, and that's why we have a big community. So I guess that's what I want to wrap it up with.
Okay. So, Mickey, we'll close it here in just a second and you can let us go. But what about in this next video, we'll go grab a cup of coffee and discuss a little bit. But what about if we share something about, what's a blockchain? What's a cryptocurrency? What's a token? Just sort of just get us a little bit on board with that in the next video. And we're planning to make a whole series of them so that if you listen through them, you're going to have a little bit of a beginning context and feel for this this whole new space that's opening up in finance and math and programming. Does that sound all right?
That sounds great. I'm Mickey B. Fresh, and I'm out.